Comes from Northwest Arkansas. Lilia Stemen, did I say that right? All right, I've been practicing all morning. I want to make sure I had that right. She's been living and studying natural history of the Ozarks for the past 20 years. She has spent over 10 years coordinating the curriculum and teaching classes for the Northwest Arkansas Master Naturalist Training Course, including classes in botany and how to identify the mating calls of frogs and toads prior to going back to pursue her PhD. Her research focuses on habitat restoration for flower visiting insect biodiversity, and this morning she's going to visit with us about what kind of insects are visiting the Ozark Chinquapin tree. So please welcome Lilia. Where's Lilia? All right, so it's all yours.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So this is the tree stand that I did my research in. It's located at Hobbs State Park. And it's a partnership amongst a few players. Steve Churchill initially approached Austin Jones here to potentially do this study, and he's quite busy, so I volunteered to do the field work. And then, busy with other research, I had this collection of specimens that I didn't have time to curate. So we brought in an undergraduate student, Jason Cartwright. So he's the one that actually took the time to pin the insects and do the preliminary identifications of them. And then my co-advisor, Dr. Bittinger, he's the taxonomist among us. So after Jason did his preliminary identifications, we mailed the specimen to Dr. Bittinger, and he did the final identifications. And then Dr. Joshi is my advisor, and he's been very supportive of this project from the beginning. You know people on this page, but basically it takes a lot of people to keep these tree stands healthy and thriving. And not pictured here are all the volunteers that go out and hand water these trees, because without that we wouldn't have the seed set that we have. A few years back, a master's student at the university, Colton Zirkel, did a study where he did these exclusionary netting around the flowers of the Chinquapin tree. Some of them would exclude both insects and wind. Some of them would exclude only insects. Some would have a honeybee introduced to the netting, and then some would be just open and accessible to both wind and insects. And the question was, how significant are insects in pollination of the Ozark Chinquapin, because they are able to wind pollinate. But what they found was that with both insects and wind, you get a 50% increase in pollination, which is quite significant. And the fact that these trees are so generous in their production of nectar and pollen is also an indicator that insects are very important. The tree spends a lot of energy making pollen and nectar, and so that just kind of was a good clue that insects are very important in the role of pollination. So then that led me to want to know more about which specific insects were visiting these flowers. So I wanted to know what was happening during the day and what was happening at night. So I went out there for 6 days and 8 tree replicates, 10 minutes observational time per tree, 4 sessions per day, 3 during the daytime and 1 at night, totaled over 1,900 minutes of observation. And so during the day, we mostly had bees, flies, beetles, and butterflies, and mostly on the male catkins, which are these prolific pollen producers. And then at night, we have a lot of moths and beetles actively collecting and foraging. So this is the results from my observational study. So this is just me watching what's happening and recording based on categories of insects visiting. So we have beetles. They start to become more active late morning, and then they're pretty much consistently active throughout the day. Bumblebees start out late morning, and they kind of peak in the morning and then start to less activity as the day progresses. Butterflies get really peaking in late morning, midday, in the late afternoon. Flies come in early morning, they're peaking throughout the midday, and then they start to taper off. Green bees down here, not as much activity, but they're more active late morning, midday. Honeybees, they kind of a later afternoon active. They like it a little bit drier and warmer. Of course, moths are going to be mostly active at night, and sweat bees are, again, a late afternoon activity. So this kind of gives you an idea of what categories of insects are busy at what time of day. This is the breakdown of that observation. So we have quite a bit in the category of butterflies and moths. Beetles, very significant presence. Flies are actually the most significant in terms of number of insects visiting. And then we've got a little bit of wasps, and then the different categories of bees. And then this shows you the type of visitation day and night. So a lot of activity of daytime insects, and then whether it was full nighttime or that dusk time. So in terms of number of insects visiting, there's more activity during the day. A lot of that was the flies, but quite significant activity at night as well. So then I wanted to know, not only based on these categories of visitation, but what are the actual species of insects visiting? So I collected over 200 specimens. And this is just a breakdown of those collected specimens once we've identified them. So we have the largest number collected were in the categories of butterflies and moths. Quite a few beetles, flies, bees and wasps, true bugs, and a couple of lacewings. And then this breaks it down for the specimen collected, which ones were collected at night versus during the day, and then at dusk. So lot were collected during the day, but almost a 50-50 mix of insects collected during the day versus insects collected at night. Now, that's significant, especially given the fact that I spent more time collecting during the day. So there's quite a lot of activity at night. And Steve Churchill, you asked me this last time I gave this presentation. You were curious, what was the breakdown of the number of specimens I collected between moths and butterflies? And quite a significant amount more moth species were collected than butterfly species. Just some examples of some of the butterflies active on these flowers. So the eastern tiger swallowtail and the pipeline swallowtail, and the eastern-tailed blue butterfly, the great spangled fritillary, the silver-spotted skipper. So quite a few different butterfly species. And then, most significantly, however, are all the moths. So these are some of the common moth species. Interesting that some of them are agricultural pest species, so that's worth commenting that, maybe if we had a thriving population of chinkapin, there wouldn't be as much pest pressure on the crops. This one was tied for first for the most abundant moth collected during this study. And again, this is a pretty significant pest species. This is the other one tied for first, and this is also a pest species. The most abundant insect visitor collected, however, was this ragdoll flower beetle. But the most commonly seen beetle species on the flowers was this leather-winged soldier beetle. And I think more than anything, this soldier beetle wasn't so much feeding as it was mating. And so they were present day and night. So it brought an interesting, a few interesting questions emerged from that. This was the most popular or common bumblebee species, this two-spotted bumblebee. And you can see all this pollen collected on the hind legs. So just very prolific pollen producer. So this is what the female flowers look like. They're out on the tips of the branches. And then these are the male flowers. And so they're the ones with all the pollen on them. But they should theoretically all have nectar. But I didn't really find any direct attention from insects on the female flowers. So what I propose is that there's a lot of passive pollination going on. So bees and butterflies and moths, they have all these hairs covering their bodies. So they're constantly collecting pollen. Regardless of whether they're collecting any nectar from the female flowers, the fact that they're covered in pollen and flying all about, they're going to be depositing pollen grains on the female flowers. So I do think there's a significant amount of just passive pollination just with all the insect activity. Here's some examples of moths. I believe that she is perched on this female catkin in emitting pheromones to collect a mate. And so even if it's not directly feeding, even if it's just mating behavior, you have a lot of activity surrounding these flowers. And again, more opportunity for passive pollination. And a few weeks later, I did go back and there's proof that pollination occurred, whether it be from wind or the passive insect visitation or a combination of both. And what I propose is that more insect visitation research gets done in the future. The more time you spend out there, the more you can observe, the more species you will be able to collect and a better understanding you'll have. And with enough time out there, perhaps somebody will be lucky enough to see direct pollination of an insect drinking nectar from female flowers. One thing that when you have a canopy tree as significant as the Ozark Chinquapin, where it was at one time potentially 1 in 4 canopy trees in eastern North America, when you have a situation where those trees virtually go extinct in a short amount of time, you can imagine that if there were specialist insects that co-evolved with that tree, that they may have also declined along with the tree. So we're still hopeful that we may be able to find a few specialist pollinators, but nonetheless, it's a significant contributor to the ecology in terms of pollen and nectar for a lot of our generalist pollinators. And ultimately, when you're trying to preserve biodiversity and pollinator biodiversity, you want to provide floral resources well beyond the species that you're interested in. So the Ozark Chinquapin blooms for just a good week and a half. And so you need pollen and nectar throughout the foraging season for all the varieties of pollinator species. So as much as you can have native plants that are blooming early in the season throughout till the late season, the more diversity of insects you'll be able to support, and the greater visitation you'll have during the time that the Ozark Chinquapin is blooming. And the goal is the more visitation by insects, the greater the pollination, the higher the seed set. And as we mentioned, the yellow-throated warbler is out there. I thought that picture looked familiar. So we're, of course, we've talked about this tree being significant for lots of wildlife, mammals that feed on the nuts, and the insects that feed on the nectar and pollen, but you've got the entire ecosystem depending on trees of this significance in the forest. So any effort we can make to restore that to the ecosystem, the better. I just wanted to, those of you who do a lot of field work can appreciate this, the number of sea ticks out there. So I tried to do this like taping, where I would tape the sticky side out and try to prevent them from crawling up. But this was just taking that tape and like plodding my legs after walking through. So even with it being mowed, it was
a bad
an adventure. Does anyone have any questions?
Can I show you a picture of bugs on a Chinquapin and you tell me what they might be?
Yeah, in a few minutes. Probably
Okay,
not right this second. So hopefully there'll be more interest in doing research and studying these insect visitors of the Ozark Chinquapin in the future. All right, thank you.